Renegade soldiers in Mali declared on state television that they had seized power in the West African state in protest at the government's failure to quell a nomad-led rebellion in the north. AngloGold Ashanti, RandGold, IAMGold and Resolute Mining operate in the country. Joining us now to discuss the country's risk profile is Samir Gadio, is emerging market strategist at Standard Bank. Samir, thanks very much indeed for your time. Sorry to be discussing this. Unfortunately, we're not talking about how to advance investment and how to get money into Mali. We're talking about the impact of a surprise that I was discussing here earlier with the Minister of Trade and Industry in Botswana about trying to markets want certainty. Here we have a situation where a government has been changed unceremoniously. What kind of an impact do you see?
Well, I mean, first of all, it was quite unexpected. I mean, obviously tensions had been rising in recent weeks. There were protests and some discontent in the military because of the way the war in the north was handled. But obviously no one really expected that the military coup would take place and end 2 decades of civilian rule and quite successful democratic experience in Africa. I mean, having said that, the impact is likely to be relatively limited because Mali doesn't have its own currency. It uses the CFA franc, which is pegged to the euro, so there won't be any impact on the exchange rate side. It doesn't have any listed equities. The telecoms company Sotelma was going to be listed on the BRVM in a few months. That might be potentially delayed, so it's something that the market will be watching. The local currency bonds are very illiquid, so they're not going to react. I think most of the reaction has been on the mining side, so basically the stocks of the gold mining companies operating in Mali have reacted sharply. We've seen RandGold losing something like 13–14% today. Same with AngloGold, AngloGold, etc. So quite a sharp impact at that level.
Absolutely. So the miners and investors globally have been spooked by this development. But in terms of policy changes from this change in government, what are you expecting?
Well, it's very early to tell, quite frankly. We don't even really know who's going to be in charge per se. The new authorities have said that they want to set up a government of national unity, which would lead the country to new elections.
They will always say that one day.
The irony here...
They will always say
yes, and the irony here is that actually... The irony is that a presidential election was actually scheduled for April, and the current president, Toumani Touré, was not going to stand because he served 2 terms. But my feeling is that they're not going to make any substantial policy changes in the short term. So to some extent, foreign investors should probably not be worried per se about policy changes, but it's the security situation on the ground that could be a concern. As you know, there is still a civil war going on in the north, and the rebels are now ready to move further south, so it could be an issue.
Yeah, and certainly from a mining perspective, the CEO of RandGold was in Mali today, and they issued a statement saying the mines were operating normally and they didn't see much change. But perhaps, Samir, before we go, just give us a quick summary of why we should care about Mali. Why should the investor community care about Mali?
Well, you see, Mali in itself is a poor landlocked country. So obviously, you know, you could argue that it's not that important. But having said that, it's one of the first countries which initiated the democratic process in Africa in the early 90s. So after the 1991 revolution, they held a free and fair election in '92, which frankly was an example across the board. Now, if you assume that it's all right to overthrow a democratic regime and seize power by force, then obviously you give the wrong signal to other people in other countries who might also try the same thing. So the response of the international community in coming hours is likely to be critical. I mean, we've seen France, the EU, Nigeria condemn the coup d'etat, but let's see how far they're ready to go.
Yeah, indeed, we also saw the US condemning the coup, so it does seem to have been condemned globally. I've actually been told that I've got more time with you, so let's just explore the impact around the region, because this is a region that we know, you know, military coups are common, unfortunately, we have to say it. Do you see any impact beyond Mali itself?
They are common, although, let's put it that way, over the last 10 years, the magnitude and the frequency of the coups has declined. Now, The issue here is that so the MLNA Tuareg rebel group fought alongside the Gaddafi troops in Libya. When Gaddafi fell, they came back to Mali with heavy weapons, but not only to Mali, to actually Niger, to some other countries in the Sahel. So this region now is becoming very unstable, and on top of that, you have some jihadist groups which are operating there. So frankly, I mean, it's a very dangerous cocktail that we have in the Sahel right now, and I think the international community should help those countries which are very fragile address this issue, because otherwise I fear that some other countries might be affected going forward.
What kind of help, though? Should we be looking at the military option here? I mean, obviously one has to think in terms of West Africa. You have to look at Nigeria and think, should Nigeria be looking here to intervene and reverse this coup, so we establish this trend where coups cannot be tolerated in Africa?
It could be a military help, it could be intelligence, it could be also some diplomatic support. For example, I think France has tried to create the right conditions so that the government and the rebels in the north could discuss and find a compromise. So there are several options, but clearly time is of the essence, and they have to act quickly, because otherwise the situation will deteriorate going forward. But when it comes to the jihadist groups, obviously this is really a security threat that I think is becoming increasingly serious, and you know, the US and the major countries in the West are fully aware that they have to act quickly.
Around the region, is there anyone who's profiting from this coup? And I mean in terms of the countries that are the neighbors of Mali?
I don't think so. I think most of the ECOWAS states are going to denounce the military coup in Mali, because that's the rule, basically. If you come to power by force, you're not recognized by the institution, you're suspended until you organize free and fair elections and hand over power to civilians.